When you're dying of fever, you'll talk to anyone. In Chapter 36, Stevens finds a lifeline in the local Padre. He's the only guy in town with a library and a decent conversation, but the vibe in Nohcacab is still weird as hell. We're watching a town that has no idea they're living on top of the greatest ruins in history. You know the drill. Subscribe, hit that like, and keep the mission moving. Shout out your home base in the comments. Who's riding through the recovery phase with us? We're looking at the village intel. Stevens is trying to gather info while Catherwood is a zombie in a hammock. Between the local doctors who know nothing and the Padre who knows too much, it's a mess. It's a study in 1840s small-town politics, and Stevens is losing his patience. Turn it up. The church bells are ringing. Let's move.
Chapter 36.
The plan opposite, number 57, indicates a position of all the buildings which have been discovered at Palenque. There are remains of others in the same vicinity, but so utterly dilapidated that we have not thought it worthwhile to give any description of them, nor even to indicate their places on the plan. From the palace, no other building is visible. Passing out by what is called the subterraneous passage, you descend the southwest corner of the terrace, and at the foot immediately commence ascending a ruined pyramidal structure, which appears once to have its steps on all its sides. These steps have been thrown down by the trees, and it is necessary to clamber over stones, aiding the feet by clinging to the branches. The ascent is so steep that if the first man displaces a stone, it bounds down the side of the pyramid, and woe to those behind. About halfway up, through openings in the trees, is seen the building represented in the engraving number 58. The height of the structure on which it stands is 110 feet on the slope. The engraving represents the actual condition of the building, surrounded and oversown by trees, but no description and no drawing can give effect to the moral sublimity of the spectacle. From the multiplicity of engravings required to illustrate the architecture and arts of this unknown people, we have felt obliged to omit many striking and picturesque views, for fear of wearying the reader. The ruins and the forest made the deep and abiding impression upon our minds. But our object is to present the building as restored, as subjects for speculation and comparison with the architecture of other lands and times. The supposed restorations were made after a careful examination, and in each case the reader will see precisely what we had to guide us in making them. I must remark, however, that the buildings are the only parts which we attempted to restore. The specimens of sculpture and stuccoed ornaments were drawn as we found them. The engraving number 59 represents the same building cleared from forest and restored, and, according to our division, marked on the photo number 1. In the plate are given the ground plan, beginning at the bottom, the front elevation, a section showing the position of tables within, and the front elevation on a smaller scale, with the pyramid structure on which it stands. The building is 76 feet in front and 25 feet deep. It has 5 doors and 6 piers, all standing. The whole front was richly ornamented in stucco, and the corner piers are covered with hieroglyphics, each of which contains 96 squares. The 4 piers are ornamented with human figures, 2 on each side, facing each other, which are represented in the following engravings in the order in which they stand upon the piers. The first, number 60, is that of a woman with a child in her arms. At least we suppose it to be intended for a woman from the dress. It is enclosed by an elaborate border, and stands on a rich ornament. The head is destroyed. Over the top are 3 hieroglyphics, and there are traces of hieroglyphics broken off in the corner. The other 3 following are the same general character, Each probably had an infant in the arms, and over each are hieroglyphics. At the foot of the two center piers, resting on the steps, are two stone tablets with what seemed interesting figures, but so encumbered with ruins that it was impossible to draw them. The interior of the building is divided into two corridors, running lengthwise, with the ceiling rising nearly to a point as in the palace, and paved with large square stones. The front corridor is 7 feet wide. The separating wall is very massive and has 3 doors, a large one in the center and a smaller one on each side. In this corridor, on each side of the principal door, is a large tablet of hieroglyphics, each 13 feet long and 8 feet high, and each divided into 240 squares of characters or symbols. Both are set in the wall so as to project 3 or 4 inches. In one place a hole had been made in the wall close to the side of one of them, apparently for the purpose of attempting its removal, by which we discover that the stone is about a foot thick. The sculpture is in bas-relief. The tablets are represented in the engravings, numbers 64, 65. The construction of the tablets was a large stone on each side and smaller ones in the center, as indicated by the dark lines in the engravings. In the right-hand tablet, one line is obliterated by water that has trickled down for an unknown length of time and formed a sort of stalactite or hard substance, which has incorporated itself with the stone, and which we could not remove, though perhaps it might detach by some chemical process. In the other tablet, nearly a half of the hieroglyphics are obliterated by the action of water and decomposition of the stone. When we first saw them, both tablets were covered with a thick coat of green moss, and it was necessary to wash and scrape them, clear the lines with a stick, and scrub them thoroughly, for which last operation a pair of blacking brushes that one had picked up in my house at Guatemala and disobeyed my order to throw away upon the road, proved exactly what we wanted and could not have procured. Besides this process, on account of the darkness of the corridor, from the thick shade of the trees growing before it, it was necessary to burn candles or torches and throw a strong light upon the stones while Mr. Catherwood was drawing.
The corridor in the rear is dark and gloomy, and divided into 3 apartments. Each of the side apartments has 2 narrow openings, about 3 inches wide and a foot high. They have no remains of sculpture or painting or stuccoed ornaments. In the center apartment, set in the back wall and fronting the principal door of entrance, is another tablet of hieroglyphics, 4 feet 6 inches wide and 3 feet 6 inches high. The roof above it is tight, consequently it has not suffered from exposure, and the hieroglyphics are perfect, though the stone is cracked lengthwise through the middle as indicated in the engraving number 66. The impression made upon our minds by these speaking but unintelligible tablets I shall not attempt to describe. From some unaccountable cause they have never before been presented to the public. Captains Del Rio and Dupaix both refer to them, but in very few words, and neither of them has given a single drawing. Acting under a royal commission and selected doubtless as fit men for the duties entrusted to them, they cannot have been ignorant or insensible of their value. It is my belief they did not give them because in both cases the artists attached to their expedition were incapable of the labor, and the steady, determined perseverance required for drawing such complicated, unintelligible, and anomalous characters. As at Copan, Mr. Catherwood divided his paper into squares. The original drawings were reduced and the engravings corrected by himself, and I believe they are as true copies as the pencil can make, the real written records of a lost people. The Indians call this building an escuela or school, but our friends the Padres called it a Tribunal of Justice, and these stones, they said, contain the tables of the law. There is one important fact to be noticed. The hieroglyphics are the same as were found at Copan-Quirigua. The intermediate country is now occupied by races of Indians speaking many different languages and entirely unintelligible to each other. But there is record for the belief that the whole of this country was once occupied by the same race, speaking the same language or at least having the same written characters. There is no staircase or other visible communication between the lower and upper parts of this building, and the only way of reaching the latter was by climbing a tree which grows close against the walls and the branches of which spread over the roof. The roof is inclined and the sides are covered with stucco ornaments, which, from exposure to the elements and the assaults of trees and bushes, are faded and ruined, so that it was impossible to draw them. But enough remained to give the impression that, when perfect and painted, they must have been rich and imposing. Along the top was a range of pillars 18 inches high and 12 apart, made of small pieces of stone laid in mortar, and covered with stucco, crowning which is a layer of flat projecting stones, having somewhat the appearance of a low open balustrade. In front of this building, at the foot of the pyramidal structure, is a small stream, part of which supplies the aqueduct before referred to. Crossing this, we come upon a broken stone terrace about 60 feet on the slope, with a level esplanade at the top, 110 feet in breadth, from which rises another pyramidal structure, now ruined and overgrown with trees. It is 134 feet high on the slope, and on its summit is the building marked number 2 like the first, shrouded among trees, but presented in the engraving, number 67 as restored. The plate contains as before the ground plan, front elevation section and front elevation on a smaller scale, with the pyramidal structure on which it stands. This building is 50 feet front, 31 feet deep and has 3 doorways. The whole front was covered with stuccoed ornaments. The 2 outer piers contain hieroglyphics. One of the inner piers is fallen, and the other is ornamented with a figure in bas-relief, but faded and ruined.
The interior, again, is divided into 2 corridors running lengthwise, with ceilings as before and pavement of large square stones, in which forcible breaches have been made, doubtless by Captain Del Rio, and excavations underneath. The back corridor is divided into 3 apartments, and opposite the principal door of entrance is an oblong enclosure, with a heavy cornice or molding of stucco, and a doorway richly ornamented over the top, but now much defaced. On each side of the doorway was a tablet of sculptured stone, which, however, has been removed. Within, the chamber is 13 feet wide and 7 feet deep. There was no admission of light except from the door. The sides were without ornament of any kind, and in the back wall, covering the whole width, was a tablet given in the engraving, number 68. It was 10 feet 8 inches wide, 6 feet 4 inches in height, and consisted of 3 separate stones. That on the left, facing the spectator, is still in its place. The middle one has been removed and carried down the side of the structure, and now lies near the bank of the stream. It was removed many years ago by one of the inhabitants of the village, with the intention of carrying it to his house. But after great labor, with no other instruments than the arms and hands of Indians and poles cut from trees, it had advanced so far, when its removal was arrested by an order from the government forbidding any farther abstraction from the ruins. We found it lying on its back near the banks of the stream, washed by many floods of the rainy season, and covered with a thick coat of dirt and moss. We had it scrubbed and propped up, and probably the next traveler will find it with the same props under it which we placed there. In the engraving it is given in its original position on the wall. The stone on the right is broken and, unfortunately, altogether destroyed. Most of the fragments have disappeared. but from the few we found among the ruins in front of the building, there is no doubt that it contained ranges of hieroglyphics corresponding in general appearance with those of the stone on the left. The tablet, as given in the engraving, contains only 2/3 of the original. In Del Rio's work, it is not represented at all. In De Pays it is given, not, however, as it exists, but as made up by the artist in Paris, so as to present a perfect picture. The subject is reversed, with the cross in the center, and on each side a single row of hieroglyphics, only 8 in number. Probably, when De Pays saw it 34 years before, it was entire, but the important features of 6 rows of hieroglyphics on each side of the principal figures, each row containing 17 in a line, do not appear. This is the more inexcusable in his publishers, as in his report De Pays expressly refers to these numerous hieroglyphics, but it is probable that his report was not accompanied by any drawings of them. The principal subject of this tablet is the cross. It is surmounted by a strange bird and loaded with indescribable ornaments. The 2 figures are evidently those of important personages. They are well drawn, and in symmetry of proportion are perhaps equal to many that are carved on the walls of the ruined temples in Egypt. Their costume is in a style different from any heretofore given, and the folds would seem to indicate that they were of a soft and pliable texture like cotton. Both are looking toward the cross, and one seems in the act of making an offering, apparently of a child. All speculations on the subject are of course entitled to little regard, but perhaps it would not be wrong to ascribe to these personages a sacerdotal character. The hieroglyphics doubtless explain all. Near them are other hieroglyphics, which reminded us of the Egyptian mode of recording the name, history, office, or character of the persons represented. This tablet of the cross has given rise to more learned speculations than perhaps any others found at Palenque. De Pays and his commentators, assuming for the building of very remote antiquity, or at least a period long antecedent to the Christian era, account for the appearance of the cross by the argument that it was known and had a symbolical meaning among ancient nations long before it was established as the emblem of the Christian faith. Our friends the Padres, at the sight of it, immediately decided that the old inhabitants of Palenque were Christians, and by conclusions which are sometimes called jumping, they fixed the age of the buildings in the 3rd century. There is reason to believe that this particular building was intended as a temple, and that the enclosed inner chamber was an Oratorio, or oratory, or altar. What the rites and ceremonies of worship may have been, no one can undertake to say.
The back corridor is divided into 3 apartments. In the center, facing the principal door of entrance, is an enclosed chamber similar to that which in the last building we have called an oratory or altar. Its outline is seen in the engraving. The top of the doorway was gorgeous with stuccoed ornaments, and on the piers at each side were stone tablets in bas-relief. Within, the chamber was 4 feet 7 inches deep and 9 feet wide. There were no stuccoed ornaments or paintings, but set in the back wall was a stone tablet covering the whole width of the chamber, 9 feet wide and 8 feet high. The tablet is given in the engraving, number 72, and I beg to call to it the particular attention of the reader, as the most perfect and most interesting monument in Palenque. Neither Del Rio nor De Pays has given any drawing of it, and it is now for the first time presented to the public. It is composed of 3 separate stones, the joints in which are shown by the blurred lines in the engraving. The sculpture is perfect, and the characters and figures stand clear and distinct on the stone. On each side are rows of hieroglyphics. The principal personages will be recognized at once as the same who are represented in the tablet of the cross. They wear the same dress, but here both seem to be making offerings. Both personages stand on the backs of human beings, one of whom supports himself by his hands and knees, and the other seems crushed to the ground by the weight. Between them, at the foot of the tablet, are two figures sitting cross-legged, one bracing himself with his right hand on the ground, and with the left supporting a square table. The attitude and action of the other are the same, except that they are in reverse order. The table also rests upon their bended necks, and their distorted countenances may, perhaps, be considered expressions of pain and suffering. They both are clothed in leopard skins. Upon this table rest two batons crossed, their upper extremities richly ornamented, and supporting what seems a hideous mask, the eyes widely expanded and the tongue hanging out. This seems to be the object to which the principal personages are making offerings. The pier on each side of the doorway contained a stone tablet, with figures carved in bas-relief, which are represented in the two following engravings, numbers 73-74. These tablets, however, have been removed from their place to the village, and set up in the wall of a house as ornaments. They were the first objects which we saw and the last which Mr. Catherwood drew. The house belonged to two sisters, who have an exaggerated idea of the value of these tablets, and though always pleased with our coming to see them, made objections to having them copied. We obtained permission only by promising a copy for them also, which, however, Mr. Catherwood, worn out with constant labor, was entirely unable to make. I cut out of Del Rio's book the drawings of the same subjects, which I thought, being printed, would please them better. But they had examined Mr. Catherwood's drawing in its progress, and were not at all satisfied with the substitute. The moment I saw these tablets I formed the idea of purchasing them, and carrying them home as a sample of Palenque, but it was some time before I ventured to broach the subject. They could not be purchased without the house, but that was no impediment, for I liked the house also. It was afterward included among the subjects of other negotiations which were undetermined when I left Palenque. The two figures stand facing each other, the first on the right hand fronting the spectator. The nose and eyes are strongly marked, but altogether the development is not so strange as to indicate a race entirely different from those which are known. The headdress is curious and complicated, consisting principally of leaves of plants with a large flower hanging down, and among the ornaments are distinguished the beak and eyes of a bird and a tortoise. The cloak is a leopard's skin, and the figure has ruffles around the wrists and ankles. The second figure, standing on the left of the spectator, has the same profile which characterizes all the others at Palenque. Its headdress is composed of a plume of feathers, in which is a bird holding a fish in its mouth, and in different parts of the headdress there are three other fishes. The figure wears a rich embroidered tippet and a broad girdle with the head of some animal in front, sandals and leggings. The right hand is extended in a prayerful or deprecating position with the palm outward. Over the heads of these mysterious personages are three Kabbalistic hieroglyphics.
We considered the Oratorio or altar the most interesting portion of the ruins of Palenque, and in order that the reader may understand it in all its details, the plate, number 75, is presented, which shows distinctly all the combinations of the doorway, with its broken ornaments, the tablets on each side, and within the doorway is seen the large tablet on the back of the inner wall. The reader will form from it some idea of the whole, and of its effect upon the stranger, when, as he climbs up the ruined pyramidal structure, on the threshold of the door this scene presents itself. We could not but regard it as a holy place, dedicated to the gods, and consecrated by the religious observances of a lost and unknown people. Comparatively, the hand of ruin has spared it and the great tablet, surviving the wreck of elements, stands perfect and entire, lonely, deserted, and without any worshippers at its shrine. The figures and characters are distinct as when the people who reared it went up to pay their adorations before it. To us it was all a mystery, silent, defying the most scrutinizing gaze and reach of intellect. Even our friends the Padres could make nothing of it. Near this, on the top of a pyramidal structure, was another building entirely in ruins, which apparently had been shattered and hurled down by an earthquake. The stones were strewn on the side of the pyramid, and it was impossible even to make out the ground plan. Returning to number 1, and proceeding south at a distance of 1,500 feet, and on a pyramidal structure 100 feet high from the bank of the river, is another building, marked on the plan number 4, 20 feet front and 18 feet deep, but unfortunately in a ruined condition. The whole of the front wall has fallen, leaving the outer corridor entirely exposed. Fronting the door and against the back wall of the inner corridor was a large stucco ornament, representing a figure sitting on a couch, but a great part has fallen or been taken off and carried away. The body of the couch, with tiger's feet, is all that now remains. The outline of 2 tigers' heads and of the sitting personage is seen on the wall. The loss or destruction of this ornament is more to be regretted, as from what remains it appears to have been superior in execution to any other stucco relief in Palenque. The body of the couch is entire, and a leg and foot hanging down the side are elegant specimens of art and models for study. The plate, number 76, represents this relief, and also a plan, section, and general view of the building. We have now given, without speculation or comment, a full description of the ruins of Palenque. We repeat what was stated in the beginning. There may be more buildings, but after close examination of the vague reports current in the village, we are satisfied that no more have ever been discovered, and from repeated inquiries of Indians who had traversed the forest in every direction in the dry season, we are induced to believe that no more exist. The whole extent of ground covered by those as yet known, as appears by the plan, is not larger than 20 to 30 acres. In stating this fact, I am very far from wishing to detract from the importance or interest of the subject. I give our opinion, with the ground of it, and the reader will judge for himself how far these are entitled to consideration. It is proper to add, however, that considering the space now occupied by the ruins as the site of palaces, temples, and public buildings, and supposing the houses of the inhabitants to have been, like those of the Egyptians and the present race of Indians, of frail and perishable materials, and, as at Memphis and Thebes, to have disappeared altogether, the city may have covered an immense extent.
The reader is perhaps disappointed, but we were not. There was no necessity for assigning to the ruined city an immense extent, or an antiquity coeval with that of the Egyptians or of any other ancient and known people. What we had before our eyes was grand, curious, and remarkable enough. Here were the remains of a cultivated, polished, and peculiar people, who had passed through all the stages incident to the rise and fall of nations, reached their golden age and perished entirely unknown. The links which connected them with the human family were severed and lost, and these were the only memorials of their footsteps upon earth. We lived in the ruined palace of their kings. We went up to their desolate temples and fallen altars, and wherever we moved we saw the evidences of their taste, their skill in arts, their wealth and power. In the midst of desolation and ruin we looked back to the past, cleared away the gloomy forest, and fancied every building perfect, with its terraces and pyramids, its sculptured and painted ornaments, grand, lofty, and imposing, and overlooking an immense inhabited plain. We called back into life the strange people who gazed at us in sadness from the walls, pictured them in fanciful costumes and adorned with plumes of feathers, ascending the terraces of the palace and the steps leading to the temples, and often we imagined a scene of unique and gorgeous beauty and magnificence, realizing the creations of Oriental poets, the very spot which fancy would have selected for the happy valley of Rasselas. In the romance of the world's history, nothing ever impressed me more forcibly than the spectacle of this once great and lovely city, overturned, desolate, and lost, discovered by accident, overgrown with trees for miles around, and without even a name to distinguish it. Apart from everything else, it was a mourning witness to the world's mutations. Nations melt from power's high pinnacle when they have felt the sunshine for a while and downward go. As at Copan, we shall not at present offer any conjecture in regard to the antiquity of these buildings, merely remarking that at 10 leagues distance is a village called Los Tres Cruces, or the Three Crosses, from 3 crosses which, according to tradition, Cortez erected at that place when on his conquering march from Mexico to Honduras by the Lake of Peten. Cortez then must have passed within 20 or 30 miles of the place now called Palenque. If it had been a living city, its fame must have reached his ears, and he would probably have turned aside from his road to subdue and plunder it. It seems therefore but reasonable to suppose that it was at that time desolate and in ruins, and even the memory of it lost.